Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Sandra Hartstone Show. Well, we have a very interesting topic today. We are going to talk about the numbers of people converting to the Muslim religion, even people that are leaving Christianity and going to the Muslim religion. Did you know that after 9/11, there was a tsunami of people converting to the Muslim religion? I don't know, I found that just like so shocking. But anyway, to answer those questions that we have about that is Joel Richardson. Joel is a New York Times best-selling author. His first book to become a bestseller was called The Islamic Antichrist, where he compares how similar the Quran is to the Bible when it comes to the return of Jesus, which, of course, it's no surprise that Satan is trying to closely mimic the real thing when bringing in a counterfeit. Anyway, Joel has some very, very interesting things to say today about what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on in America. And what is the reason? He has some very interesting ideas on why America is not really holding our own as far as spreading Christianity and what we can do to make a difference. We'll be right back with Joel Richardson. Welcome, Joel Richardson. You are a New York Times best-selling author of actually a very fascinating book called The Islamic Antichrist. So welcome.
It's good to be on with you, Sandra. Thanks so much for having me.
Listen, before we get going, do you mind telling us how in the world you got involved in all things Middle East and becoming an expert in the Middle East and even writing that book?
So it's been a 30-plus year journey. I came to faith in 91, and shortly thereafter, there was a missionary that came to our church, and he explained that at the time, half of the unreached world, so the unreached world, it's the part of the world that really doesn't have any really chance of hearing the gospel, like one missionary for every 500,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, half of the unreached world were Muslim. And so, the Islamic world represented half of the unreached world. We were sending less than half of 1% of the Protestant missionaries to the Islamic world at the time. And so as a new believer, when I heard this, I committed my life to the Islamic world. For me, that meant the Middle East. And so I've been involved, ever since then. Over the past 10, 15 years, I've been working with a ministry called Global Catalytic Ministries. They work primarily in Iran. This is the underground church, really the fastest, most viral underground network in Iran, as well as Afghanistan, Iraq, and throughout the Middle East. And I work with another ministry called FAI. They also work in Iraq and Syria and throughout the Middle East. Also lead tours to Saudi Arabia and Israel and Jordan. And so I'm over there pretty regularly. It's just the calling the Lord's had on me, and I expect that to be the case until the grave.
Well, when you have a calling for it, it's a passion that kind of erupts inside of you, and that's just what you eat, live, and breathe and think about. So, in your book, you talked about how Muslim faith is growing faster than anything, and people that are watching this wouldn't be surprised that very soon the Muslim religion could outgrow Christianity. Is that still so?
It is. In fact, it's much more.
Wow.
It's becoming closer to becoming reality than when I wrote about it 20 some odd years ago.
Wow.
We have to understand, Christianity is exploding, for example, in Iran. But the numbers are still comparatively small. So let's just take an example of England or the UK. You presently have about, in the UK, I'm not sure the exact numbers of immigrants, but you have a lot of Muslim immigrants over the past, 40, 50 years, right? You have roughly 3,000. Okay, so England would have been considered a Christian nation at one point, but you have about 3,000 former Muslims who are Christians now. So they converted, they were Muslims, they've converted and become Christians. You have about 200,000 Brits that have converted to Islam. So, with numbers like that, you can see the percentages of Westerners that are converting to Islam versus the Muslim immigrants, for example, that are becoming Christians. The numbers aren't even close. Now, in
Wow.
nations like Iran or Afghanistan, you have a very high number that are becoming Christians. But again, it's still a much smaller number. Like you may have 1 million believers in Iran. Some people say it's as high as 2 million. That's probably the highest that there is. But that doesn't, globally speaking, we're still sort of losing the numbers game as far as that goes, which it really shouldn't bother us. Christianity it's always been said that it's a remnant. It's not about having the biggest numbers. Narrow is the path that leads to eternal life, and few are those who find it. So, I mean, this is really the way it was supposed to
Well,
be, if
well,
I can say it that way.
well, obviously, I'm assuming you've interviewed plenty of people that used to be Christians or used to be just nothing and then became Muslims, right?
So yeah, I mean, obviously in the West, there's a very high number there. One of the
Why?
biggest things, I mean, there's a million different reasons. Let's just say you take a very educated woman who is a post grad at Harvard University,
Hmm.
and she converts to Islam. You go, what is she thinking?
Yeah.
Well, maybe she'll say something like, I was raised Christian. I saw the way men treated women in the church. I see the way these popular Christian singers dress. You can't tell the difference between them and Britney Spears or this or that. I got tired of in the Western world being treated like, an object or a piece of meat. Now I put on this head covering and I'm protected. I'm covered. It's much more modest, this type of thing. I mean, like everyone's going to have their different reasons.
Wow.
One of the most significant factors in the West, in the United States, over the past, again, 40 years, has been the Nation of Islam. So, Malcolm X and then Farrakhan and all these. And so a very, very high percentage of Muslims in the United States are actually African American. And they have done a very, very good job of speaking to the pain in the African American community. And so you had, this massive
Oh,
Muslim cult, the Nation of Islam. But then I'm going to say about 20 years ago, one of the leaders, the son of one of the founders, actually left the Nation of Islam and became Orthodox Sunni Muslim. And he took, again, hundreds of thousands with him. And so today you have a very high percentage of Muslim converts in the United States are African Americans. But it's certainly much more than that. When you hear the stories, you start realizing, I'll just say, the seductive nature of Islam. It's a lot
wow.
more powerful than most realize.
Well, why was there such a? This is the part that just flabbergasts me. You state in your book that after 9/11, there was just like this huge waterfall of people rushing to the Islamic faith, which I don't understand that because I thought that was the culture that was blamed for the whole crisis.
Exactly. So
Explain that to me.
I'll say it this way. Okay, you have two cultures that are clashing. One culture, the Islamic world, has been taught from the beginning, you are the best people. You have the best religion. You have the best prophet. You have the best book. And there's all these prophecies that say, and you're destined to conquer the whole world. Islam will become
Oh,
supreme. So they've been indoctrinated from the time that they're young children. You are the best. You are the best. You are the best. Your culture's the best. Your religion's the best. Here in the West, we've been told for the past 40 years just the opposite. You're the worst. You're the worst people in the world. You should be ashamed of your history, of who you are, of your race, of this, that, and the other thing. And
wow.
so you have this very culturally this culture that's cowering, that's ashamed of itself. Every left-wing president that gets in travels around the world and apologizes for America. We've lost any sense of value for our culture, our history. And so when you have a weak culture clashing with a very confident culture, one runs right over the other one. And this is true of Christianity as well. We have the words of life. We are stewards of the gospel, the only message whereby men can inherit eternal life. But we're not confident in our message. Most Christians today don't evangelize, they don't share the gospel, and they meet this other culture that's very confident. So after 9/11,
Mm,
we in the West started going, online and joining these Islamic chat forums or going to Barnes and Noble and buying Qurans and studying and saying, what is this thing, Islam? What's it all about? And we didn't have a sense, we didn't have a fight in us to say, no, Christianity is superior. The gospel message is superior historically,
wow.
logically, emotionally. And so you had all these people that were just researching Islam, and many, many were converting. And to a degree, that's still true today. I see often Christians clashing with Muslims, and the Christians lack confidence. They're afraid. They're afraid to enter into dialogue with Muslims, and Muslims are confident and aggressive, and it's a very unfortunate dynamic that's unfolding right in front of us.
Wow, the church has failed in this area, haven't they?
Yeah, we really have. I mean,
Wow.
there's this story that I love where this youth pastor sent out his youth, and this is a good analogy for the whole church. He sent them out to a local fair festival, and he said, "Do evangelism," and none of them could because they hate it. They're like, "I don't want to go up; it's awkward." And then he goes, "Okay, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to give every one of you $20. If you can get a person to listen to the whole gospel presentation, don't tell them beforehand, but if they will politely listen to the whole presentation, you get to give them $20 for free." The kids went out, they were excited, they shared the gospel because they knew that if they could only get the person to listen, they had this blessing of being able to give them $20. Well, it's like, salesman. If the salesman is not confident in his product, you can pick up on that. You sense that. You know when the person trying to sell you something believes in
Oh,
their product.
right,
You can
right.
emotionally, you can feel that. In the church today, we've been browbeaten, we've been beaten down, and we've embraced that shame. We don't have a sense of confidence. We need to reclaim a sense of confidence in the message. If we don't believe it ourselves, how can we share it with others? And that's really where we are today. The church, it's not just that we failed, it's that we're losing faith ourselves, if I can say it that way. Not saying everyone, but the church itself is falling away. We're seeing it right in front of us.
So do you think this is the great falling away that Jesus told us was coming?
I mean, statistically, when you look at the number of, our children that are leaving the churches, the number of people that are leaving the churches, the number that are not coming back after COVID in the West, it absolutely, we're imploding rapidly. So you could say, is it
Wow.
the great falling away? No, I think that's the apostasy that happens when the Antichrist shows up at the middle of the final 7 years. But in many ways, it's kind of unfolding preliminarily right now in front of us.
Well, if people are hanging on by a thread when that comes, they're going to be goners.
Yeah. And
Wow.
that's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Wow. Joel, are you involved in anything to try to build up, muscle up the church in this hour?
Look, my call again, it's yes to the Middle East, to the Islamic world, but it's also to prepare the church for what's coming, to prepare the church for the great challenges that are ahead, to prepare the church, to get them excited for the return of Jesus. Half of the church today or more, they won't even talk about the return of Jesus. They go, "Oh, that's the end times. That stuff's weird. We talk about all these other issues." And I go, "Guys, this is the blessed hope. This is why are we laying down our lives? Why are we embracing the cross? Why are we forsaking the temporal pleasures of this life? Why are we dying to our dreams, our hopes, and all these things? Because we have something so much better in front of us. And we should be talking about the return of Jesus. We should be talking about the kingdom that he will establish when he returns, the renewal of all things, the restoration of Eden, of course. I've been, the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of research into the early church writings, the early church fathers, in terms of what they believed about the rapture. And, they knew nothing about a pre-tribulational rapture. For them, it was the great trial, the great test is coming. We need to be prepared because they didn't have any concept of a pre-tribulational rapture. They didn't have any concept of once saved, always saved. They had the concept of work out your salvation with fear and trembling because the great trial is ahead and many will
Wow.
fall away. And so for them, it was about
Wow.
preparing for what's coming and ultimately checking yourself. Make sure you're actually in the faith because we can lie to ourselves. Make sure that when you stand before him on that day, that your faith will be shown to be true and not in word only. So the concept of the end times, it loomed heavily in the early church, and we've lost that completely today. For us, it's just, I'm a Christian, I go to church, I wear the t-shirt. There's not a lot of that deep conviction of the Holy Spirit to check our lives, to make sure, are we listening to the Holy Spirit? Are we following that conviction? And so, yeah, this is my passion, is to wake the church up. Because listen, Sandra, the storm isn't just on the horizon anymore. It's
Yeah,
over
here.
the roof of our houses. It's
Right.
here. And,
Hmm.
there's all these, I hate to say it, but false teachers out there that are telling, like, the definition of a false prophet is the prophet that says, don't worry, you're going to be out of here anyway. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. The Babylonians are not coming, and we have plenty of those. And I mean, they mean well, but they're lulling the people to sleep. And I think it's dangerous. We need to get ready for it's about to hit us like a tsunami.
Wow. What exactly are you doing? Are you going into churches? Are you holding seminars? What exactly are you doing?
So I spend a lot of my time teaching. Yeah, we do teaching on YouTube, and we have an app with Frontier Alliance International where we release regular teaching. And yeah, I'm traveling and speaking in churches. And again, I take groups to the Middle East, to Saudi Arabia, and to Israel, and we do teachings there and that sort of thing. And then behind the scenes, as I said, I'm really working with GCM, Global Catalytic Ministries, Frontier Alliance International, just to see the gospel proclaimed throughout the Middle East. And in the same way that the West is falling away from Christianity, many in the Middle East are leaving Islam, and the soil is really fertile there. And so for me, I'm not saying I'm not focused here in the United States, but I want to maximize the return
Yeah.
on my investment. If that's where the Lord's moving is in the Middle East, then that's where I want to put my efforts forward.
Right. Well, now, are people in is the reason middle or Muslim religion is growing faster than Christianity? Is it because they're all converting? Is it because they're having more children than people in the West, or what's going on with that?
I mean, it's all of the above, right? The Western world, like, look, Osama bin Laden had 51 brothers and sisters. So, of course, his father had multiple wives, but I mean, the point is, I don't know what the average, family in the United States, I think it's like one or two at the most, one and a half or
Yeah.
something. The
Hmm.
Middle East has, large families, so you can't beat the demographics just in terms of birth rates.
Hmm.
But by the same token, the conversion rates are another significant factor. So it's not happening quite as rapidly as I had sort of predicted in my book, but it's happening. We're pushing 1.9 billion Muslims globally,
Wow.
and we're still hanging about 20 years ago, just a little over 2.2 billion Christians. Now, from a Protestant perspective, you have to figure well over half of those are Catholic and Orthodox, and then much more are just nominal Christians. So, how many of the 2.2 billion global Christians are really born again who know the Lord? And even if you said half of the Muslims, 1.9 are zealous Muslims, it's about the same. There's about the same number of actual Christians to real Muslims in the earth right now.
Do the Muslim people have the same problem that Christians do with a lot of lukewarmness and a lot of and just naming it in faith in the words?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I take Ubers a lot with all my travels, and I'm constantly, a lot of my drivers are Muslim, and we have all kinds of great conversations. And when you talk to Muslim parents, they're dealing with the same thing that Christian parents are dealing with. Yeah, my kid's being discipled by YouTube, and this type of thing, and they're not really passionate about their faith and this type of thing. So, especially here in the West, like, it's not just in the West, it's everywhere. But the whole world is just mesmerized, staring at their phones, just the opiate of the masses, just looking at TikTok and Instagram and this type of thing. But in the West, we have more distractions. We have more, opiates, so to speak, in popular culture. So yeah, I mean, it's a problem everywhere. There's movements of Muslims becoming atheists throughout the Middle East right now, just leaving the faith entirely. So it is a problem everywhere, and it's obviously hard to track statistically all of these things, but yes, for sure.
I just don't get it because, and I understand, I'm sure my view is skewed, but when I look at it, I see, especially in the Middle East, that the Muslim religion is very harsh, especially on women. I'm still trying to understand why any woman would walk into that, the way they're treated. Is that wrong? Is my perception wrong?
Well, I mean, to a degree, look, the Middle East is very family oriented. So you could say they're harsher on their women, they are. But from the Middle Eastern perspective, they look at the United States and they go, man, you people treat your women like just sex objects. Look at the way they dress. Look at
Oh,
this type of thing. So they see it as, well, you don't protect your women, you don't value your women, you don't cover them, this type of thing. So
oh,
it's some of it is perception. But yeah, look, like in Iran, for example, right now, the revolution in Iran, a big part of this is the anger of women, the strength of women. 1979, Iran, previous to the Islamic Revolution in 79, was leaning toward the West. You look at pictures from Iran, you had people at the beach, men and women together, and this type of thing. They were dancing and these type of things. Ayatollah Khomeini comes in, establishes the Islamic Revolution, and you have situations. For example, this is the type of thing that the Iranians have put up with. Let's say a woman wears a little too much makeup, and one of these women come up. They're part of the religious police, and they say, "Oh, they have a napkin. You've got too much lipstick on. I'm going to wipe it off." But they've got a razor blade in their napkin, and they slit their lips wide open. This is the type of oppression that radical Shia Islam or radical Sunni Islam puts on their women. There's no question about it. The more radical, rigid, strict forms of Islam always oppress women because Muhammad himself did. And so the people are suffocating. They're oppressed. They don't like it. And that's why a big part of the revolution in Iran is being spearheaded by women. They're tired of it.
Really?
And so, yeah, there's no question that there is a very genuine oppression there.
What do you think is going to happen with this whole revolt that's going on? Do you think they're going to eventually win or not?
I hate to make predictions. Let's just put it this way. It's going to become much more bloody. There's already been, I'm going to say the numbers, around 500 people have been killed. Look, when you have an apocalyptic regime that's in power, they don't give up power easily.
Mm-hmm.
And they have multiple different sort of militia forces, military units. They've got the Sepah, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That's actually a whole separate military that's there just to protect the Ayatollah, the religious community. Then they also have the Basij, the Basij, the secret police, the plainclothes police, and then they have the regular military. And all of these are going to be working against the people. So if the people hold up, it could be a problem. I think Iran, the biggest threat that Iran has is not just within, but it's actually from Turkey. Right now you have, let's just say, the ancient Ottoman Empire versus the Safavids, the Iranians. You have these sort of the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece or Yavan. This part of the world has been clashing for thousands of years, and they both today want to control the heart of the Middle East. Iraq and Syria. They want to be the alpha dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this sort of ongoing historical conflict between that part of the world, Turkey, and that part of the world, Iran. And they pretend to be friends sometimes, but ultimately, I think long term, we'll see Iran, the Iranian government, subdued and sort of come under the dark horse of Turkey. And we could see that even over the next few years.
Wow. Well, we've got to take a break, Joel, but we will be right back with Joel Richardson.
Hi, friends. Dr. Michelle Sherwood here.
I'm Dr. Mark Sherwood.
Many people know about our clinic, but we also have a desire to help people who can't personally visit us, but still want to take steps towards better health.
Our 2-week health reset is a great first step and requires no video appointments or tests.
With our health reset, you will get 28 detox shakes to provide the ideal nutritional foundation, 28 supplement packs with key nutrients, and access to daily videos where we encourage you along the 2-week process.
Our health reset plan is usually $180. Now, it's just $169 with your promo code. Go to Sherwood.tv now and use the promo code on your screen to receive this exclusive offer.
Take a simple step and let us guide you on the road to feel better.
Well, welcome back. We are having a fascinating conversation with Joel Richardson about the Middle East. Joel, tell us, what exactly is going on with the underground church over in Iran?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and some of your listeners may be aware, but believe it or not, the fastest growing church in the world right now is in Iran.
Right.
We actually have, let's put it this way, the fastest official growing church is in Iran. We actually have statistics that say it may be Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Of course, the numbers are very, very small, but in terms of multiplication per year, the number of new believers, yeah, it's exploding in Saudi Arabia. Again, we're dealing with hundreds, not even thousands,
Wow.
of national believers. But in Iran, they've been growing for probably the past 10 years at roughly 20% multiplication per year. So at that rate, the church doubles roughly every 5 years. And so, again, you have sort of the culmination of different events all taking place, the merging of different events at the same time. The people are tired of Islam. They're leaving Islam behind, yet they're still spiritually hungry. Sandra, the gospel is for the poor, those that are
Hmm.
in touch
Hmm.
with their need. And so Iran today has one of the highest suicide rates in the world,
Wow.
has one of the highest drug addiction rates in the world, has one of the highest women being trafficked, percentages in the world. And the people they're poor, they're desperate, they're hungry for God, but they
Hmm.
know that it's not in Islam. And
Hmm.
so we, in partnership with the Lord, are capitalizing on this, and we're offering the gospel, and people are very hungry for it. And so it's a beautiful thing to see in this, right under the nose of this radical Islamic regime, with some of the best hacking and surveillance techniques in the world, to see that the church is still thriving, still
Wow.
spreading, still growing, and sharing the gospel. Like the church doesn't grow unless people, it's not just that they're converting and they're making disciples of others. They're sharing the gospel with others. So that's where it's gone viral.
Are you finding that when the people do convert to Christianity in Iran, I would assume that it's so dangerous and risky and alienating that they are probably pretty radical, committed believers. Is that right?
Yeah, at least in my example, they're radical and committed, but by the same token, they're fun, they're silly, they're goofy, they're regular people. When I first met a bunch of the leaders of the underground church, I thought, I'm going to go meet the John the Baptist, the Paul the Apostles. These are going to be the super soldiers. These intent, I was so
Hmm.
intimidated, and they're just regular people, fun-loving families with kids, and they're silly and goofy, and that made me say, something. If they can do it, I can do it. Like they're not. It's not this unattainable. Like I said, super soldiers. These aren't like the Navy SEALs, but yet these are the people, these normal, ordinary people that the Lord has chosen to undermine the most hostile, terrifying, one of the
Wow.
most hostile, terrifying regimes in the world. But I always like to emphasize that, to say the Lord uses the foolish and the weak things of this world to shame that which is wise. And that's exactly what he's doing in Iran.
Is the underground church part of this revolt? Or can you say?
So our particular network tries to stay out of politics. We try to keep our eye on the prize. Our primary calling is not the overthrow of the government. Our primary calling is, as Paul the Apostle tells us, to pray for the government, to pray
Hmm.
for, in the same way that we're supposed to be praying for Joe Biden, whether we like it or not. They're called to pray for their leaders. Paul the Apostle said these things under Roman rule. Like the Caesars were not good leaders, and he said, pray for those in authority.
Hmm.
So that said, would the underground church like to see the overthrow of the current government? I mean, sure, but by the same token, there's also the reality that persecution makes you clean. It keeps you awake, it keeps you alert, and so I would say there's actually kind of mixed feelings.
Really?
Um, one of the stories is one of our leaders came over here to the States with his wife, and she was here for a while. And of course, you would think every Iranian would want to move to the United States. They would want to leave Iran, but she was here for a while, and she said, "I want to go back." And she said, "I feel like when I'm here, there's this satanic lullaby, and
Mm.
it's just very quietly in the background, just
Wow.
lulling the church to sleep." And she said, "But when I'm there, I'm awake. You know that you're at the, sitting at the mouth of the beast. It keeps you awake." And she said,
Wow.
"I need to get out of here. It's putting me to sleep." And so, yeah, there's mixed feelings. The
Wow.
church, of course, they would like to see the people have a better government, but by the same token, they realize that this current government is actually leading people
People to
to
Christ.
Jesus.
It
Yeah.
is. Wow. Are there many people being arrested or killed because of their Christianity?
So there are. There's constantly reports of different networks and groups that are getting caught and arrested, and the government's very good at extracting information. If they catch one, they torture them, or rape them, or whatever it might be, to give up names of their other friends and community members. So that's always a reality. These guys don't play fair, but they're aware of the risks, and they're holding firm. Now, the government is not always going to do that. I want to be clear, but it definitely happens, and it's part of what it means to be a Christian in Iran.
What do we as Christians need to do here in America? I mean, for those that are hearing what you're saying about the growing numbers of Muslims and how the Christian church just seems to be so pitiful, they don't know how to own it. What's your advice to the believers that are waking up to what you're saying? What do we do?
Well, look, as I said, I want to maximize the return on my investment. And by investment, I mean my prayers, my money, my time, my energy. And, I'm 50, so I'm getting older, but I'm still young. But, when you hit 50, you can kind of see the finish line. And, you realize you only have so much time and energy. And I want to return, I want the greatest return on my investment. So for me, I go, if this is where the Lord's moving in the Middle East, this is where I'm personally investing my time and energy. And so you can always get behind ministries like GCM with prayer, and of course with financial support. Here in the West, what can we be doing, besides just offering to support to groups that are showing genuine fruit, is I'm trying to wake people up. Again, there's so many churches out there, they're doing good things, and I don't want to be that guy that just bashes, every church, but we are asleep. The church is asleep. And, as I said earlier, the storm isn't just on the horizon anymore. It's over our roofs. It's here. We're in the middle of it. We are the frog in the kettle being cooked. And we need to wake up and recognize what the Bible says about what's coming, to heed the warnings, to throw off a lot of these, I would say, these false doctrines, the pre-tribulational rapture, once saved, always saved. We need to take this thing seriously and realize the time of testing is coming. And it's something that we all need to prepare our lives and our hearts for. And I say this, I'm preaching to myself, because this is, this is it. We have a race to finish, and the finish line is ahead. And it's that last little sprint that's always the most difficult.
So as believers, we've got to own it. We got to believe it. We got to be passionate about it, because passion wins. Whoever has the most passion in the room wins. And you know what? We just can't keep saying, well, it's up to the churches, or it's up to the pastors, or it's up to people in ministry. If you're an auto mechanic, if you're a mailman, whatever you are, and you're a believer, you've got to be out there sharing your faith. You've got to be mindful that we are put on this earth to serve him. He's not here to serve us. It's the other way around. So you mentioned that you're doing research. Is this going to be a new book about the beginning founders or the early church's beliefs?
Well, no, I'm doing some research right now. I teach a lot.
Okay.
So I'm working through what the early church believed with regard to the rapture and the return of Jesus. They knew nothing of any pre-tribulational rapture. But as I read a lot of their writings, of course it's a mixture. When you read some of these guys, some of it's weird, but a lot of it's really convicting. Many of them were living under persecution at the time, but they were preparing for the great tribulation to come, and they were trying to prepare their church for it. And a lot of the things they say, it just resonates. It's so much more biblical than so much of the preaching that we get today in the modern Western American pulpits. And so it's actually refreshing.
Are you reading like Josephus, or where are you getting your information that old?
So Josephus is, a Jewish historian, but no, I'm talking about like the early church writers like Irenaeus and Hippolytus and Ephraim the Syrian and Andrew of Caesarea and all of these guys, Justin Martyr, considered, in the Catholic Church, the early church fathers. But it's amazing. I mean, I'm up to about the 7th century, and you don't find one single reference in any of their writings to a pre-tribulational rapture. They all expected the church to face the Antichrist. Now, what's interesting is you'll get some of these guys, and I'm sure they mean well, who are now claiming, they'll pull these different quotes out of context and twist them and say, well, this guy believed in a rapture, look at this. And I go, read the next line or read the next paragraph. They clearly didn't. You're twisting. So in the same way that some of these guys are twisting Bible passages out of context, now they're actually trying to twist history and twist the writings of the early church fathers. So I'm working through some of these statements and saying, no, this guy was not pre-tribulational at all. He clearly, again, expected the church to face the Antichrist, and he was preparing his people, his listeners, his readers to face the Antichrist in the Great Tribulation, and that's what we need to be doing as well.
So this is a different topic. Are the people in the Middle East just laughing their head off at how stupid we are eating all this wokeism?
I don't know. You know, they're dealing with their own particular culture. I'm not sure how familiar they are, but I think, yeah, look, the Middle East, they look like we look at the Middle East and we go, man, they're so backwards. You know, they cover their women. They're looking at the West and going, you guys are backwards. I mean, you got men dressing like women and pretending to be this, and you know, like they're going, you guys are crazy, and they're right. Like we've lost without God, the West has gone absolutely bananas. It's crazy. We've become like when you look at skits from Saturday Night Live 20 years ago, and they were making fun of things like that, like you couldn't even like Saturday Night Live would be politically incorrect. It would get canceled today with some of the jokes that they used to make. It's just reality has become insanity, and so yeah, I'm sure they are. I don't know if they're laughing, but they're going, "Golly, geez, they need God." You know, in the
Yeah,
same
they
way that
need
we're
all of
saying that, they're saying we need it. But it's true.
Do you think that the great revival is coming in our lifetime?
Absolutely. So, you know, the Bible is clear that there will be a great falling away, a great apostasy, specifically in the last days, and we're seeing it already. I mean, you look at the statistics, the church is imploding here in the West. However, to be clear, throughout the scriptures, not only does it talk about a great falling away, Jesus said the love of most will grow cold, they'll betray one another. Paul, the apostle, talked about the apostasy. It also says in Joel chapter 2 that before the great and terrible day of the Lord, and he talks about the cosmic signs, the sun going dark, the moon turning to blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, and this sort of thing. And some people say, well, that was all fulfilled at Pentecost. No, that was a preliminary, precursory fulfillment, an interim fulfillment. But you didn't have the sun going dark, the moon turning to blood. And Peter says this is that which the prophet Joel spoke of, but he clearly, any first century Jew would have understood. That doesn't mean it's the ultimate fulfillment. He knew that the context of the prophecy was before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And so, yes, there will be a great outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So we need to be prepared for both the great apostasy and the great ingathering. These things actually are not contradictory. They can happen at the same time.
Right.
In many ways, I think we're seeing the beginnings of that even right now.
I agree, because what I see as I travel around is I do see people falling away who, you know, God didn't answer their prayers, COVID stayed, all these things that have happened. They're like, well, you know, God didn't answer my prayers, I'm out of here. But then on the other hand, people that have never really known Christ are fearful of all that's going on, and they see something's up and they are rushing to the altar. So there is both going on at the same time. You know, Joel, in the few minutes that we have left, it's a very interesting topic, this Islamic Antichrist. Do you mind talking a few minutes about, you talk in your book about how what we are expecting to see in the second coming and what Islam is seeing is so parallel.
Yeah. So, for example, the Bible teaches that, I'm going to simplify this, that in the last days, you have really two main bad guys. You've got the Antichrist and the false prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the main good guy, and that's Jesus. He returns and he defeats them both. Well, from the Islamic perspective, in the last days, you have two primary good guys. You have their Messiah figure known as the Mahdi, and then they believe another guy is going to come back, and he's going to be Jesus. And they say Jesus will be a Muslim, and he'll be an assistant to the Mahdi, and he'll tell the Christians of the world that you had it wrong all along, your Bible's corrupt, he never died on the cross. No, he was a Muslim, and Islam's the true religion, and all you Christians need to become Muslims and follow the Mahdi. And then, of course, they believe that a fake Jewish Jesus, and they call him Ad-Dajjal, that means the Antichrist, they believe the Antichrist is going to be this fake Jewish Jesus who will claim to be Jesus the Messiah, claim to be God, and all the Christians will think that he's Jesus. So they've taken the whole story and flipped it on its head. They've taken the biblical story, they've made all the good guys the bad guys, the good guys. Islam teaches that in the last days they'll invade the land of Israel, defeat Israel once and for all, engage in a slaughter of Jews, and that their Messiah figure will establish his seat of authority over the world from the Temple Mount, from Jerusalem, for a period of 7 years. So again, exactly what the Bible says with regard to the Antichrist, that's what they expect their Messiah figure to do. This is actually how I connected with the underground church in Iran. Is I wrote this book in 2003, 2004, and one of the leaders of the underground church read it online. I put all my books online for free, and he just said, if this is true, this is the greatest deception imaginable, because this whole story about the Islamic Messiah figure, this is how the Iranian government stays in power. They say they are the stewards, the temporary stewards of Islamic government, and holding it until the Mahdi comes. The Ayatollahs are the stewards of the Mahdi, so to speak. And so he translated the book into Farsi, into Persian, and taught all of his leaders. And he said, we need to be prepared for this. And then actually came over here to the States to meet me. And that was about 12 years ago. And so we've been working together ever since.
Well, it's not surprising because Satan does know the Bible.
Exactly.
Of course, he's going to make it close and parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't know what to say. You got everybody else around the world who's awake, who's in the game, who's fighting, and your friend is right. They came over here. We're sleeping. I don't understand. I don't know what it's going to take to get the church in the battle, Joel. Do you?
Pain, bloodshed. You look back at sort of the hippie protest movement in the United States in the 60s. It's not until the bloodshed really began that people started waking up, so to speak. And you've got a whole generation of kids who are just asleep, again, on TikTok, on social media. But when their friends start dying, when things really get bad, that's when the church is going to wake up. And unfortunately, this is how the Lord always does it. He uses pain as a megaphone.
Right.
And
Right.
we haven't felt enough pain yet.
Well, do you have any suggestion on the best way to fight all this wokeism and teaching our kids lies and the wrong things?
I really don't. I've got 5 kids, and thankfully my kids are, kind of like typical Christians. They say all the right things. Their lives don't always line up with it, but they think all of the wokeism is just ridiculous. They look at sorry about that. They look at the things that they're being taught. I've got 2 in college right now, and they're like, this stuff's ridiculous, So I really don't know what the secret sauce is. It's difficult, but we're, like I said, we're the frog in the kettle. I mean, it's all around us. I mean, not just the kids, but the adults are being indoctrinated by it as well. We're being brainwashed.
Oh, it is. When I was young, if a girl would get pregnant out of wedlock, you might suspicion it because you would hear the mothers in another room whispering and you wouldn't know it. And now it's like, oh, it's your second date? Well, we're supposed to be intimate. I mean, it's just a given. Things have come so far.
Now you've got parents that are celebrating their kids being mutilated and being given growth hormones. Like it's not the parents are hoping their kids will be more lives. They're cheerleaders for immorality and insanity.
It makes no sense. And here's the thing. You're not mature enough to buy a beer until you're what, 21? You can't vote till you're 18, but at 12, you can decide you need to be the opposite sex, which has far more consequences and is permanent and for the rest of your life.
It's horrific.
Whereas drinking a beer, it's just that night, It's just, it's the insanity. But it's also like Save the Whale, pro-abortion, bumper stickers on the same car, Yeah. What we value, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm just so burdened with you, Joel, that the church is so asleep and really not getting in the game. We have to quit living for self because selfishness is running this. We have to quit worrying about our bank account and what people think of us. We've just got to live it because eternity is eternal and this life is just here today.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
The message of the cross remains true. Following Jesus means taking up our crosses. It's not about a self-betterment program. Not saying that following Jesus won't make you better, it will, but that's not what it's about. It's about dying to
Mm,
ourself. And we need
yeah.
to get back to preaching the message of the cross, preaching eternal consequences, preaching about hell for that matter, things that you don't hear about anymore in the
Yeah.
churches. So,
Well,
absolutely.
personally, I think it's not even about church attendance getting the little tick mark. Trust me, God's not taking attendance up there. What's important is you don't want to go to church because you don't like the religion, then go to your closet and get on the floor and spend that 45 minutes on your face. And you know what? You don't have to keep talking and you don't have to keep asking for things. You just have to say, Lord, I'm here. I love you. My life is yours. Because, Joel, you're married. I don't have to ask my husband what kind of food he likes when he goes to the grocery store. I just know. I usually know how he's going to respond to things my kids say. I know because we've been married 40 years. And that's the way it is with the Lord. If you just establish this really deep, intimate relationship with him, then you don't have to ask. You just kind of know. He just talks to you in those ways. Well, Joe, you've just been a fascinating guy to have on the show. I've just really loved everything you had to say. And your website is joelstrumpet.com. And tell them about the other ministry. What's the full name? Global Catalytic Ministries, right?
That's right. And their website is catalyticministries.com. You just type in Global Catalytic Ministries, it'll pop up. And yeah, we've got regular prayer meetings during the week that you can get on Zoom if you want to join us on
Wow.
Wednesdays, and sign up for our newsletter to hear more about what we're doing.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I do wish you guys the best. Godspeed.